Wales isn't lacking in history. We have the highest concentration of castles per square mile in Europe, and this ancient land has been written about for thousands of years. But what about the digital world of gaming? England lays claim to industry legends like Traveller's Tales, Bullfrog Productions and Creative Assembly, and Scotland, well, they dominate the industry with Rockstar. There's plenty of representation, sure. Frequently, Welsh accents are heard across FromSoft's Dark Souls series as well as Elden Ring, and both the main character and his antagonist hailed from Cymru in Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
A merry life and a short one, that's my motto.
But what about the developers? Yes, we have more sheep than people, and our population is smaller than that of London's, but that doesn't mean we have had no impact.
Jwlar.
Our story begins underground, not in a mine or Danarogov, but 6,400 kilometers or nearly 4,000 miles away in Kentucky, USA. Mammoth Cave has been a wonder for humanity for 5 millennia, and a favourite amongst spelunkers for well over a century. It was one of those brave souls, William Crofer, who used the caverns as his inspiration behind the namesake of the adventure game genre itself, Colossal Cave Adventure. A text-based affair that went on to influence Zork and Rogue, Colossal Cave Adventure's combination of dangerous caving and Dungeons & Dragons fantasy elements sparked the imagination of computer academics worldwide, not so much gamers at this time. The original code, a combined effort by Crofer and Don Woods, was designed to run on large mainframes, usually isolated to universities, and the idea of running such a game built with over 3,000 lines of code on a home computer in 1977 was a pipe dream. One of those academics was John Jones Steele, who was studying here at Abersoft University on the always sunny west coast of Wales. Thanks to a brilliant interview found in issue 1 of the UK retro gaming bookazine series, The Classic Adventurer by Mark James Hardestry, we learn that as Jones Steele studied for his BA at Aberystwyth, he also worked at the faculty as a computer operator during the late 70s and early 80s. Encouraged by the university to learn a variety of programming languages, including assembly, COBOL and Fortran, John Steele would use his spare time to create simplified versions of the most popular arcade games for his Sinclair ZX81, such as Pac-Man, or shall I say Maze Man, Asteroids, that's Spectroid Storm, and Wizard of War, or the Wizard Warriors. These bootlegs, unauthorized ports of famous games for home PCs, flooded the UK market at the time, and Jones Steele rode that wave, selling his own to help fund investment in other home computers, allowing him in turn to port them again to that new system. To aid this small business venture, Jones Steele needed a name, Abersoft, a portmanteau of Aber and software. Aber meaning river or estuary in Welsh, but in this instance chosen by shortening the name of the company's hometown. It was thanks again to this century-old university that Jones Steele first encountered Colossal Cave Adventure when the ICL 4130 mainframe he had previously been working with was upgraded to a Honeywell 6000 series, which came with a copy of the text-based adventure pre-installed. John loved the game and immediately began writing a version for the ZX81, which was made even easier after he gained access to the original Fortran code version during a visit to the University of Manchester. The resultant program was released in April of 1981 as Adventure 1. While he had used all the compression techniques he knew to fit the game within the ZX81's limited memory, the initial port still required some abbreviations and alterations to the original game. Soon after, however, when the ZX Spectrum was released, with a whopping 48 kilobytes of RAM, Jones Steele perfected his version by removing those compromises. Being the first port of Colossal Cave Adventure to the UK home market made the game an instant success, and Jones Steele even recalls a famous singer sending him a letter, joking that it took ages for the stage to be broken down after a performance because all the roadies were distracted playing the game. It wasn't long before it was picked up by a publisher for larger scale re-releases, most famously by Melbourne House under the new title Classic Adventure. And according to Hardestry, it was this version that adorned the shelves of many British gamers more often than not in the 1980s. Released on cassette tape, the overleaf of the cover describes the text-based adventure as well as anyone. Before Colossal Cave Adventure in 1978, games all had something more or less in common. The player knew the rules and had to try to use them to get the best score. In Adventure, the aim of the game is to discover the rules. The computer acts as the player's eyes and hands. It will tell you where you are and what you can see. You tell the computer what you would like to do by giving it simple 1 or 2 word commands. Lauded for a wicked sense of humour and addictive puzzle-solving gameplay, it reviewed well across the board. While other ports came to market later, praised for their additional complexity and greater difficulty, it was Classic Adventure's low price point of £9.99 that kept it a staple. Even by 1984, just 7 years after Colossal Cave Adventure was created, it was being praised for its historical and cultural significance, and Abersoft's Classic Adventure was seen as akin to a re-release on newer systems for players who missed out on the original. Unfortunately, that publishing deal is a sour memory for Jones Steele, as it was closer to them hiring him as a freelancer and using his naivety to take the rights to his product from under his nose. He personally ported Classic Adventure to the Amstrad CPC, BBC Micro, Commodore 64, Acorn, and more on their behalf, but failed to receive his fair share of the sales. Classic Adventure may have struck a chord with gamers, but it isn't what Abersoft is best remembered for. That award goes to Abersoft Forth, a piece of software that allowed users of the ZX Spectrum to code in Forth, a programming language advertised as flexible as BASIC, yet almost as powerful as machine code. While it wasn't a game itself, it did allow enthusiasts to create their own games far more quickly and with greater fidelity than was possible without it. Its back cover exclaims that it's ideal for writing fast-moving arcade games in full colour and with sound. To put it in a very modern lens, this was the equivalent of something like RPG Maker or Little Big Planet, though much more mentally challenging. Before the era of the graphic user interface, operating a PC was handled via a command line, the most well-known example being Microsoft DOS, but there were many more. The ZX line of machines came packaged with Sinclair BASIC. All the programs for these machines were written in this language, and users could even write their own games by coding them from scratch, following a series of instructions printed in a magazine. Understandably, loading these lines of code from a tape or floppy disk was a much less time-consuming affair and appealed to a wider audience. Still, for those who enjoyed coding and wanted to write their own programs, Sinclair BASIC came with limitations. Limitations that Abersoft Forth promised to circumvent, allegedly allowing them to run programs up to 50 times faster than those written in BASIC. Forth differed from BASIC in that it allowed coders to create their own complex commands, known as words, saving loads of time while writing. It even had its own online fan club, the Forth Interest Group, or FIG for short. They served as a source of language education, and although they're now dissolved, a website is still maintained as a memorial. Abersoft Forth was the only software of its kind for the Spectrum that FIG endorsed, and as such came pre-packaged with a number of pre-made commands that those enthusiasts found essential. The only downside is that games programmed using Abersoft Forth can only be loaded on another machine that is running it, as the base Spectrum is unable to compile Forth code without the software, hence sharing these more powerful games was mostly off the table. Even so, every reviewer could find gave high praise to the piece of kit, lauding it as the best Forth compiler on the system for its large selection of included words, fast boot time, more creative sound options than possible with Sinclair BASIC, and its comprehensive user-defined graphics system. The only complaints concerned typos in the manual, which can be frustrating when trying to understand what a specific command does. Even to this day, fans of Abersoft Forth have decompiled the software on GitHub, proving a fandom for this niche piece of work all this time later. Outside of Abersoft Forth, Abersoft continued to plod along as the go-to porting company for a variety of publishers, creating ports of D-Generation and Ultima 6 for the Amiga and Atari ST, and a version of Driver for the Macintosh. That later title is the firm's last credited release. While it is accurate to attribute that work to Abersoft, a closer look at the credits revealed that much of the work was completed by John Jones Steele alone, with the company's name mostly serving as a professional frontage. Much of this history would have been a lot harder to research and compile without the help of this article on Games Job Live by Andrew Gordon, so all credit goes to him for providing a solid foundation for this video. A port of Driver isn't where John's story ends though. While one door closed, another opened when he met renowned graphic artist David Rowe. Rowe is the cover artist for a wide array of classic games, including Ant Attack, which was even nominated for Best Original Game at the very first Golden Joystick Awards. By travelling to various game exhibitions with his portfolio in hand, Rowe would introduce himself to a variety of publishers in hopes of securing work. Through this method, he made contact with EA, subsequently becoming the artist for the first Madden, creating print adverts for Lemmings and designing the covers for the iconic Popular series, a duology of games that helped make Peter Molyneux and his Sweet Little Lies the gaming Goliath he was in the 2000s. While researching this video, I was continually surprised by how interconnected the British gaming scene was in the late 20th century, no doubt due to its relatively small size. Rowe's artwork was even used as the basis for the CGI advert created by none other than Industrial Light and Magic. It was during his time working on commissions for Melbourne House, that publisher behind Classic Adventure and Abersoft Forth, that David Rowe met John Jones Steele, but not before he worked on one of the most instantly recognisable children's TV shows of the 80s, Nightmare. Rowe was the illustrator behind the brilliant backgrounds, which were superimposed onto footage shot against a blue screen, the first show of its kind to use such chroma key technology as a staple of its set design. Created by Tim Child, a producer at Anglia TV in Norwich, the show itself was inspired by a ZX Spectrum video game, namely Attic Attack, as well as how blue screen tech was being used for the weather forecast on news programs. The general premise followed a group of 4 children, one of whom was the blindfolded dungeoneer and the other 3 acting as their guides, as they explored a medieval fantasy dungeon comprised of Rowe's airbrushed artworks. The children would need to work together to overcome various challenges along the way, like puzzles and unsavory characters, in hopes of reaching the loot at the end. Originally produced by Anglia TV, the second series was produced independently by Child at his newly formed production company, Broadsword Television. While Rowe's illustrated backgrounds remain a favourite among fans of the critically acclaimed cult classic show, the need to modernise saw the show use more and more 3D CGI, and by Series 8 airing in 1994, all the backgrounds were fully computer generated. 1 year later, David Rowe and John Jones Steele would find themselves as directors of the game development company Broadsword Interactive, originally founded under the name Player Bonus Limited, and with Nightmare's Tim Child as a director, the rebrand to Broadsword Interactive was likely to tie the game development firm to the television production company. However, no joint venture media ever came to light. For 4 years, nothing was made, until 1999, by which time Jones Steele had bought out the company from Child, leaving the firm in his and David Rowe's hands. While it wasn't technically founded as a Welsh game developer, with Jones Steele as a director, the registered address was changed to Aberystwyth. With this change, many of the staff members over the years too hailed from Wales, including one Di Banner, who will become much more prominent in this story a bit later. Their first game was Spirit of Speed 1937, a racing game for the ill-fated Sega Dreamcast. Its average critic score of just 5 out of 10 doesn't tell the whole story though. The reviews are among the most mixed I've ever seen, ranging from praising the game as the best racer on the Dreamcast to calling it the very worst. It is very much a Marmite of a game. It was essentially doomed from the outset, however, as it finds itself plagued by an infamous publisher, LJN. With twitchy controls, awful load times, and difficult driving physics that sit in a no man's land of not being realistic enough for race sim enjoyers or arcade enough for casual fans, playing Spirit of Speed 1937 sucks away any fun you'd expect from playing a video game. It was lovingly called the poorest excuse for a Dreamcast game I have ever laid eyes on by IGN's Jeremy Dunham, and was even awarded the worst video game of 2000 by GameSpot. Not a great start for the boys at Broadsword then. It gets better though, because in 2001 they were nominated for Worst Video Game of the Year once again, this time for Paris-Dakar Rally. Can you imagine the poor soul who opened up this for Christmas that year? Anyway, here's my copy. This may sound odd, but it really isn't that bad, and that's not just nostalgia talking. Booting up this game again for the first time in decades, and it's perfectly cromulent, which is to say it is terrible for a racing game, and for a rally game, well, the first Colin McRae game back on the PS1 played better than this, and looked better too. Still, 2001 must have been an exceptionally good year for games, because this isn't completely broken. When you hear Worst Game of the Year, I envision something to the tune of Big Rig's over-the-road racing. Parastakor Rally isn't anywhere near that level. If Big Rigs is a bona fide 1 out of 10, Broadsword Interactive's second game is a 2.5 out of 10, which still isn't worth playing, to be fair. Steve Smith at the Electronic Playground said that it must have taken some special effort to make a game so frustrating in all of its aspects that it seems to have been made by gaming sadists with the express intent to torture innocent gamers, and I can't necessarily disagree. The graphics are bland, and the polygon count and animation quality, especially on the bikers, makes me think this was a PS1 project ported to PS2. The sound design too is repetitive with the same whiny engine tone, and while the music is catchy on first listen, the limited number of songs had me turning it off after a few races. There are only so many times I can listen to the same 3 minutes of a stereotypical North African style track before it gets boring. Co-driver instructions often come too late, which is less than ideal for a rally game, especially one with so little differentiation between stages and with roads that aren't very well defined, as well as vehicles having a penchant for snagging on a pothole and flipping over. Now, there is a decent level of customization available between races to systems like the suspension, which does help with managing this, but it's only a plaster. The buggies in particular have a death wish. As the loading screen footage of the real-life Parastakor Rally shows, crashes are part of the event, so maybe they were trying to emulate that? The manual does state that the harsh nature of the rally means that less than 15% of the contestants ever cross the finish line. Still, without much damage physics to speak of outside of a badly stuck-on bumper, crashing doesn't even benefit from being a visual spectacle, just another means of frustration. Worst of all though, the game only gets less fun the more you play, as those issues with the sound design and music and the overall twitchiness of the vehicles become too annoying to bear. This French game mag gave it a 70%. How?
Hard left. Hard left.
It isn't all bad though. Broadsword Interactive lasted for over a decade, and it didn't do so by creating only bad games. Success finally came when they abandoned the racing genre they clearly weren't best suited for and returned to Joan Steele's original inspiration, creating home versions of popular arcade games, this time developing their own PlayStation 2 exclusive version of Dance Dance Revolution with Dance UK. Sold in a bundle with a unique dance pad that included diagonal direction as well as the standard forward, back, left and right, it took the British market by storm, selling 500,000 copies during its first Christmas. BAFTA Cymru, the Welsh division of the BAFTAs, even gave them the award for Best New Media in 2005 for Dance UK XL, one of the many spin-off titles that Dance UK received. As with the Guitar Hero and Rock Band brands, the operative business approach for this style of party game was to quickly oversaturate the market with hastily compiled sequels. Unsurprisingly, this led to the brand's death in just 3 years, but for that short time, Broadsword were riding high. It was a decent home console competitor to DDR, still there probably isn't much reason to play or own it today. Anyway, here's my copy. Unfortunately, my PS2 dance pad bit the bucket a long time ago, but believe me, from memory, they were never that good. We put up with them because the alternative was waiting for ages at the arcade to waste pounds at a time just to suck at the songs. According to the manual, the game was designed with input from an array of gamers across all ages and skill levels. Based on the difficulty of some of these songs, most of those testers were pros hidden in disguise. Reviewers found it more demanding of precise inputs than the competition, making high scores difficult, except for the most experienced players, and they weren't lying. Now I am using a controller, which isn't the ideal way of playing this game, but you only need to look at this crazy charting to see that Broadsword weren't messing around here. The jump from easy to medium is crazy enough, but expert is basically a bullet storm. For this reason, I was proud of some of my performances here. With directions tied to the D-pad and diagonals to the face buttons, it wasn't easy, downright confusing at times if anything, especially as what direction the face buttons are tied to isn't shown on screen. Obviously this isn't the intended input method, so I can't begrudge that too much. It's a miracle they even let the game be played this way at all. There are even multiple configurations to choose from. Even without all of those spin-off expansions, this original copy has a good selection of appropriate tracks across a variety of genres too. And if this didn't take players' fancy back then, well, that's what all those sequels were for. For what it is, Dance UK is pretty good. It doesn't quite meet the visual quality standards of its arcade inspirations, the dancer animation during gameplay is simply on a loop for example, but this isn't a terrible third-party entry to the DDR landscape, hence why it performed well sales-wise. My only gripe, outside of the difficulty, is that you can't pause mid-song. The whole point of home console versions of arcade games is that they're meant to be more convenient and cheaper in the long run than spending hours away from home depositing your pocket money into a machine. Losing progress in a song because the phone rang or there was a knock at the door goes against this whole philosophy. I can't stay too mad at it though when it has its own banging theme song. This tune mimics the bubblegum pop of that era to a T. After years of dance games, this golden goose laid its last egg for Broadsword Interactive, and soon they were in a state of survival. One avenue they took was going back to Jones Steele's old faithful approach of being a porting studio, working on ports of Impossible Mission to the PS2 and Nintendo Wii, a game that itself was a remake of a classic Commodore 64 title from 1984. The other avenue, however, highlights the sad reality that some game developers have to go through to keep their employees paid: shovelware. The quest for Aladdin's treasure, Robin Hood's quest, and Snow White's quest are a loosely connected trilogy of games based on the public domain stories Disney Animation had made popular with generations of children, and for as bad as they look, believe me, they play even worse. Oxygen Interactive Software Limited, originally founded in 2001, was a publisher of budget sports games before it had the wise idea to expand into the console market with a variety of action titles. Rather than set out to create the best games they could, however, they had another idea. Oxygen Interactive would ask developers to send tenders to them based on a brief, for whom then the lowest bidder would win. So, when they sent out requests to developers across Europe to make a series of games based on these public domain stories, only the developers most desperate would be given the unpleasant prospect of creating the resulting shovelware. I will preface that much of this information comes from a YouTube comment that claims to have known the guys over at Broadsword during this time, so take this all with a massive lump of salt. Unsurprisingly, the creation of these games resulted in a hideous amount of crunch, with developers sleeping at the office just to finish them on time. The publisher's goal was to have the games made as quickly and cheaply as possible, knowing they could retail it at £12.99 new before it was quickly sent to the bargain bin for a £5 a pop. Somehow, probably due to the short development time, this method still made money for the publishers back then, so they were happy to pay the developer for their time on the project. It is for this reason that hundreds of shovelware titles filled the shelves of the PS2 and Wii libraries at game stores. The average gamer may question who was buying those games, but the answer is that to the unsuspecting parent or grandparent, the difference between these two isn't clear. The standout for them is that one is significantly cheaper than the other. The games themselves then are, by all accounts, utterly miserable, and I feel sorry for anyone who has ever touched one of these horrid titles. Anyway, here's my copy. Paris-Dakar Rally being nominated for the worst game of 2001 is a travesty, as it's a damn masterpiece compared to this piece of shit. Now this is a 1 out of 10. Just a reminder that this was released in 2007, the same year as the first Assassin's Creed. The same year! The production value is in the toilet. Many PS1 games blow this out of the water just on the introductory cutscene alone. Now there was some budget put behind the game, but it wasn't in the art, sound design or gameplay. It all went to the two actors on the front of the box, who I'm sure never want to be reminded that they starred in this. The titular Robin Hood is voiced by none other than Matthew Macfadyen of Pride and Prejudice fame, and the Sheriff of Nottingham by Richard O'Brien, who wrote the iconic Rocky Horror Show. I can only imagine that the paycheck from Oxygen Interactive was very juicy. By the way, I don't think the Sheriff is even in the game. I played it to near completion and never found him, and after scrubbing through a few full playthroughs on YouTube, I still can't find him. This might straight up be false advertisement. Editing Jwlar here to say I think I've actually found where the Sheriff is in the game. I'm pretty sure it's just this laugh when you get caught. That's it. That's the entire of Richard O'Brien's contribution. What is there to say about Robin Hood's quest that you can't already see? Well, if you can believe it, this is a stealth-based puzzle adventure game. What stealth is there? There you go. See, that sleeping guard has no idea I'm here. Just don't question why all the other guards are incapable of seeing me through this dense foliage of a few trees and mushrooms. Honestly, on a design level, this feels no more advanced than classic adventure. The merry men ask Robin to find certain stolen goods, and we run around tiny areas connected by loading screens while avoiding copy-paste guards. At least we get the lowest quality ripoff of the Ocarina of Time possible with this chest opening animation.
Got it.
The camera is awful as well, constantly wanting to move to silly angles, and is frankly the main antagonist of the game, always trying to center itself even if it means colliding with the terrain and lifting up. You can drop gold to distract the greedy guards, just like in Assassin's Creed, although it barely works here. For some reason, we're able to whistle to alert them to us too, but again, this is rarely useful. Getting caught takes away a life, and if we lose all of our lives, the game restarts and has no save function. Good thing it's only about an hour long then. Most of the game is just waiting for the guards to get out of the way on their patrols, and any attempt to be creative and try to get by them with the whistle or gold is entirely futile. Boring, drab, and not worth anyone's time. A game that shouldn't exist, and proof that money grabbing is nothing new to the gaming industry. If it's any consolation though, it was a necessary evil to keep people paid. They knew it was bad. According to that YouTube comment, the devs hated it. They even framed a bad review of the game, acknowledging that they knew it was trash, but the alternative was going out of business, which by the 2008 financial downturn was all but guaranteed. Broadsword continued to float just above water for a bit longer with a Guitar Hero knockoff called Popstar Guitar, which IGN gave a 3.5 out of 10 for being clunky, fugly, and with a bottom of the barrel soundtrack. At first I thought that was harsh, but when more than half the songs are by bands I don't think anyone has ever heard of, I can see where they're coming from. It's called Popstar Guitar after all. That requires the songs to be, at the very least popular. By 2011 then, the writing was on the wall, and sadly their swan song was yet another piece of shovelware for the Wii, returning to their Dance UK roots with Andrew Lloyd Webber's Sing and Dance. If you don't know, Andrew Lloyd Webber is the English composer behind a number of the biggest West End and Broadway musical theatre shows throughout the 70s and 80s, many of which still run today. As with the Oxygen Interactive situation, this time it was Tubby Games reaching out to developers to create another fine piece of slop primed to fill any game collector's shelf. And Broadsword Interactive were there to answer the call, even if they did enter liquidation before the game released. For this reason, they don't even appear in the credits found in the manual, only being referred to by their first names in the special thanks section. Even the logo was changed, looking like a quickly put together piece of word art made following an old Blender tutorial. Press releases even mistakenly called the distributor Koch Media the publisher, and Tubby Games the developer. I don't know how you develop a game without any programmers or artists, but this credit list would have you believe that somehow Tubby Games managed it. By the way, guess who owns Koch Media today? None other than Embracer Group. We're getting a greatest hits of the worst publishers in the industry with this video. Tubby Games was a subsidiary of Tubby Music, which had secured the rights to some recorded versions of Andrew Lloyd Webber's music. According to their Twitter/X bio, they also made a Kylie Minogue sing and dance game, but Broadsword aren't even on the back of that one, so it's unclear if they were involved at all. Given Broadsword's previous success with Dance UK, there was a chance this final release would be decent, yet with so few reviews online, I guess we'll never know. Anyway, here's my copy. Guess I'll have to do it myself. I knew I kept my Wii and ancient USB microphone for a reason. I feel sorry for the old boy, being pulled out of storage to be resurrected, only to then immediately play a shovelware karaoke title.
When will my suffering end?
Suffering is the correct word to use because this game, to my eyes, is unfinished. The user interface works, but it doesn't really fit the game's aesthetic. The menu's background music is the opening 4 bars of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat played on repeat, like it's constantly edging you, and the little sparkle effects they've added to make this not look like a quickly chucked together digital image only cheapen the effect. As the box shows, this game is about singing and dancing. Not at the same time like in Just Dance, mind you, no, that would make too much sense. When do theatre actors ever sing and dance at the same time? That would be ludicrous. Instead, we have the option of a karaoke mode or a dance mode, and never the two shall meet. The discrepancy is that the karaoke mode has all of the advertised songs, while the dance mode has fewer than half that number. Some musicals, like the Phantom of the Opera, only got a single pitiful performance. Okay, pitiful may be a bit harsh, the dancing sections do work, mimicking the Just Dance games, but without the Ubisoft production value and expected visual flair. The dances were also more repetitive than Just Dance and don't really follow the theatre performance much. My wife said it was closer to an interpretive dance and theorized that the dancer wasn't given much time to develop their routine. Which is odd because the background video that plays during the karaoke mode is similar to the theatre show. So it's possible that a decision was made to simplify the dances for kids and older generations as the target audiences, or the tech behind the scoring structure limited what moves the dancer was advised to use. Some are better than others, while Phantom's singular dance is poor, the ones from Cats are more energetic. Look at this poor guy. The mental image of him dressed to the nines, dancing on a green screen, no doubt in an empty studio somewhere, is an amusing thought. And here he is, still running his own dance studio in West Yorkshire. Based on this channel, he's a good dancer, so I must assume that the limitations of the dances in the game were out of his control. And again, the backgrounds to the karaoke songs in which he also performs are much closer to what you'd expect. Also, the audio levels between songs aren't balanced. One song required me to turn the volume up significantly and the next one nearly deafened us. At least the music supplied is from the actual cast at the time of recording and they're all well done. Despite the criticisms, it all worked, and for a fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber's music, other than looking very amateurish, what with the scoring circles falling off the side of the screen and such, this was probably a satisfactory purchase. And so, the buck closes on Broadsword Interactive. And for a while, Wales was without any significant representation from a game development firm. But the story doesn't end there. John Jones Steele isn't one to quit, and back in Abersoft, he looked to set up another game development company, West Coast Software. Simultaneously, that artist from earlier, Di Banner, after stints at Eidos Interactive, working on games like the original Tomb Raider, had returned to South Wales with a goal of solidifying game development as a thriving industry in the country. In 2010, Banner, originally hailing from Treorchy in the Rhondda Valley, collaborated with my alma mater, the University of South Wales, or USW, to create Games Lab Wales. The initiative was designed to create a platform that helped to nurture undergrads towards a career in the games industry. Working as a guest lecturer for the video game art course at the time, Banner said that Games Lab Wales aimed to kickstart the Welsh video game industry and give graduates work-based learning opportunities by making links with local industry, while creating a significant sustainable video game industry presence in South Wales. But without any significant development firms in Wales itself, that was easier said than done. Until Banner became his own catalyst. In 2001, he partnered with Richard Pring, a technical director who was working with the Games Lab, and together they co-founded Wales Interactive, now by far the largest and most well-known developer we have. Pring would handle the technical side of the operation, while Banner focused on the design side. It wasn't long until they were winning awards, winning a BAFTA Cymru Games Award in 2012. While cool sounding, I will admit that the competition for this category is often quite weak, to the point that the game category isn't even held every year, in part because Wales Interactive would likely win most years by default, especially recently. Regardless, it was still promising. The winning game in question was the collaborative effort Doctor Who and the Gunpowder Plot. co-developed with BBC Wales, the studio behind the show, and Sheffield's Sumo Digital. It's now removed from the BBC's website, but it didn't look terrible for a free license game. 1 year later, in 2013, Wales Interactive's first quote-unquote real game launched, Master Reboot. The fully independent project was released on PC and the 7th generation consoles to generally positive reviews, although it is very much of its era, a time in which indie games were given more leeway and not really expected to offer experiences comparable to the larger budgeted affairs. Good for an indie game was a standard comment back then, and Master Reboot somewhat fits that bill. Even with that being the case, it's still one of the best games we've had in this video so far. This sci-fi first-person horror-based puzzle game was a pleasant surprise. The game is set around the premise of a digital platform that preserves the memories of the deceased so that they may be accessed by friends and family after death. Its ethereal virtual reality adjacent locations offer a unique visual language for a horror game, although while it is horror themed, it isn't really a survival horror. Gameplay consists of exploring each location for items or clues that help us solve basic puzzles, and the scares come in the form of the sound design and atmosphere. There isn't any real danger, and death is only punished by resetting to the beginning of the area, removing any fear the possibility of death brings. A good horror game requires a sense of real danger to truly feel scary. It's one thing to use scary imagery and loud sound effects, but the most terrifying prospect for any gamer is losing progress via failure. That's how simple graphics in the original Alone in the Dark can still get the heart racing, depending on how recently you last saved the game. Regardless, Master Reboot does maintain a strong sense of creepiness, with motivation changing from staying alive to uncovering the story and the secrets behind the digital world, known as the Soul Cloud, and the virus that is infecting it, the ominous Seren.exe. Which isn't as scary when you know that Seren is just girl in Welsh, or at least I didn't think it was scary until a possessed little girl sped towards me. What can I say, I'm a sucker for a good jump scare at times. Unfortunately, one of the methods the game overuses to jump scare us is overly loud sound effects.
Intrusion attempt detected. Initiating quarantine.
Straight up, the sound mixing is awful and risks blowing up your speakers at times. Based on the loud opening title credits, I turned the in-game volume down. The game was then played at a lower volume than preferred, with no way of changing this in-game as the menu is as bare bones as they come. In fact, there is no way of changing any settings in-game. Still, I trundled on with the low volume, only for the jump scare sound effects to play at ear-splitting levels despite the lowered volume. My audio visualizer in OBS showed normal gameplay fluttering around -20 dB, and these loud effects strayed far into the red and maxed out the reader. For a game focused on exploration, it is fairly linear too, notably in the opening segments which use invisible walls, or I guess somewhat visible walls, abundantly. It all comes down to how interested you are in uncovering the mystery. With frequent Lovecraftian references as well as local Welsh nods, it kept me playing till the end, the first game in this video to do so. A standout feature then and now is that the game is entirely playable in Welsh, an opportunity made possible through funding via our national television broadcaster, S4C. Many of Wales Interactive's games offer a Welsh language option, except for the FMV titles we'll discuss shortly, which is unfortunate seeing as other language options are available there. As an experience then, Master Reboot is decent, but as a game, its lack of a serious fail state and its overly basic mechanics leave a lot to be desired. The creative approaches to location design and storytelling do elevate an otherwise tedious game, but not enough for me to recommend it highly. What I found funny is that I would have sworn that the colour scheme and choice of a teddy bear as a recurring horror feature came as a direct result of a post-Five Nights at Freddy's world, yet Master Reboot actually predates it by a year. In another reality where the sound mixing had been better and the graphical style a touch more polished, I really could have seen this taking that PewDiePie screams at horror games era of YouTube by storm, which may indeed have been in the back of the developers' minds when they designed some of those relentless ear-shattering jump scares. After Master Reboot, Wales Interactive continued to improve on this first effort, producing more titles with a strong aesthetics-first approach while also refining gameplay. Infinity Runner was released to wider acclaim in 2014, a combination of the first-person parkour of Mirror's Edge with the auto-runner gameplay mechanics of mobile games like Temple Run. The more confined gameplay rules allowed Wales Interactive to refine the limited mechanics to make this game far more fun to play. While I would argue it is still style over substance, especially with a game length of only around 2 hours, the unique take on the endless runner genre and a strong sense of speed made it enjoyable for what it was. The music in particular stood out, blending perfectly with the gameplay and sci-fi direction. And 2016's Soul Axiom is essentially Master Reboot perfected. As a spiritual successor, the gameplay is improved and the puzzles, while not the most complex out there, are much better than in Master Reboot. And the story is more intriguing too, taking cues from more traditional approaches to storytelling in gaming than just hidden notes. Wales Interactive's unique place in the gaming industry today, dubbed the second largest producer of interactive film media behind Netflix according to director Richard Pring, was only made possible after they shifted their efforts towards publishing other developers' games and not just their own. Speaking to Jans Holstrom at Dread Central in 2021, David Banner revealed that Wales Interactive's transition to becoming part publisher was a result of meeting a variety of other indie devs at expos around the world. Enter 2016's The Bunker, developed by Splendy Interactive, one of the few games that helped instigate the full motion video genre renaissance in the mid-2010s. The original era of FMV games came at the advent of CD gaming in the early 90s, and died only a few years later, with famous examples including Plumbers Don't Wear Ties on the Sega CD and Star Wars Rebel Alliance 2 on PC and PS1. They weren't usually associated with the highest quality gaming on offer. Later in the 90s, FMV continued on as a technique rather than a fundamental part of the game design, used in place of cutscenes in titles like Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. By the early 2000s though, FMV in gaming had been relegated to the confines of history. It was only when highly cinematic games like Quantic Dream's Heavy Rain gained popularity that the door for the return of the FMV genre truly opened. Those Quantic Dream games often fell prey to the same critiques I gave Master Reboot. Graphically stylish, decently interesting stories, but with gameplay relegated to a secondary concern behind cinematic spectacle. Why then waste so much time and effort creating what can be best described as CGI film games when the film medium itself may be best suited? That mentality was shared by many developers, including Control Movie, who created the award-winning Late Shift, another home run FMV game published by Wales Interactive. It was in 2020, during the pandemic, that Wales Interactive became interested not just in publishing FMV titles from other studios, but also in becoming involved in the development process. And really, it made perfect sense. Wales Interactive has had these same strengths and weaknesses since Master Reboot. They can tell an interesting story and have the art chops to make it land, but traditional gameplay usually needed some more work. Why not then double down on that storytelling and design direction and abandon the concept of traditional gameplay mechanics altogether? FMV games work perfectly for that. After partnering with Cardiff-based Good Gate Media, the two began working on a variety of projects, all of which came with the challenge of being developed within the confines of the UK's quarantine rules. Banner mentioned how it's fairly unusual, even in the video games industry, to ever be leading. You're normally catching up, normally following. There was never a romantic comedy interactive game until they released 5 Dates. There was never an interactive sci-fi thriller until they released The Complex. 5 Dates, one of their best reviewed games to date, won a gamut of awards and trailblazed in a genre that, as Banner mentioned, didn't really exist. The closest facsimile would be the Japanese dating games, but they're animated and aimed at a different audience. Part of 5 Dates' success certainly came from the help of live streaming, especially when streaming as a form of entertainment grew exponentially during the stay-at-home rulings in 2020 and 2021. Interactive movies are the ideal type of game for streamers looking to engage with their chat and take a more laid-back approach to the actual act of playing a game. As for the most part, I'm not entirely sure this new spectrum of FMV titles can be considered video games. FMV games of the past were closer to point-and-click puzzle games with fancy visuals, but the new era is something entirely different. I decided to use 10 dates as the basis for my understanding of Good Gate Media and Wales Interactive's new approach. I originally wanted to use 5 dates based on its critical acclaim, but the trailer made it apparent that the limitations brought by the circumstances of its development, like being based entirely around online video dating, would harm the experience for me. When a game is described as being entirely developed during the pandemic as one of its selling points, it's probably heavily dated to that period, hence deciding to cover the sequel, which looked far better shot and more compelling as a result. Not to mention it has 10 dates, that's like twice as many as the last one, what a deal! Straight away, my gamer brain wasn't prepared for it, because this really is an interactive movie as Wales Interactive calls it, not an FMV game as I once knew. There are periods where a controller isn't even needed for 5 to 10 minutes, especially during the intro. Now, I knew the writing wasn't going to be aimed at me, so I chose to play with my wife for a fairer review, because I was expecting it to be pretty cringe-inducing, and it was, but only at the times when it was obviously trying to be.
Have you been waiting long?
No, I've been waiting my whole life for this.
Oh, sorry. I've only just finished work, you see, so it takes me a minute to recalibrate.
I get that.
Okay.
The premise has the main characters, either Ryan or Misha, taking part in speed dating with all the awkwardness you would expect. Based on your choices, certain dates may leave their numbers or socials, while others may walk off, leading us to whittling down our choices over a series of 3 dates taking part across a few weeks of time. Essentially, the story acts are broken into Act 1 being the initial speed dating session, Act 2 being the second date, and Act 3 the third and final date. What caused us to bounce off the game is how short one playthrough is. We finished it in around an hour. And while an end screen makes it abundantly clear that there is much more content left to find, we both felt deflated when the story ended just as it seemed to get going. We just had our first kiss and suddenly the game is over. It completely sidelined us. My wife wanted to see more character development and possibly a segment of gameplay set during the relationship, like at a pivotal moment during a fight or choosing to propose. Without that, the ending feels rather abrupt. Other than that though, the acting was fair, the writing felt realistic enough, with all the expected cringe and anxiety brought on when things aren't going well, and there's an interesting variety of personalities on offer. Personally, I wanted more control, like the ability to skip dates by being rude, but I understand that this isn't really what this take on the FMV genre is going for. Whether one of these games works for you or not then is based entirely on your interest in the premise itself, because that's what's going to drive you to want to replay the film a few times over to see all the different possibilities. For me, that clicked with 2025's Dead Reset. Taking inspiration from the Tom Cruise film Edge of Tomorrow, this alien-style horror film kept me interested in a way 10 dates failed to, likely because I'm more the target audience for this one, and also because the premise suits the medium better. Choosing what the protagonist does is more satisfying when it is diegetically aligned to the character's in-game decision-making process. We're not simply making choices because we want to see the different outcomes. The character himself is making those choices because he already knows the other outcomes result in his untimely death. What it really comes down to then is whether you consider a 3 to 5 hour long interactive movie something you're interested in. With a fair price tag of £12.79 when new, with regular sales down to £8 and below, it's around the same you would spend to rent a new movie on a service like Amazon Prime before it hits the subscription service. While heading the FMV Renaissance may be their most unique claim to fame in the gaming industry, it isn't all they do. They're still very much a creator of more traditional games, and 2020's first-person survival horror, Made of Sker, is the ideal proof of that. Based on a Welsh legend popularised by the 1872 novel of the same name by R.D. Blackmore, the game sees us take control of Thomas Edwards as we try to save our lover, Elizabeth Williams, from her apparent entrapment in the attic of the Sker Hotel. Quite a few liberties were taken from the original story, particularly the location changing from Sker Point near Kenfig to the fictional Sker Island, and the real estate of Sker House being replaced with Sker Hotel. Nevertheless, it remains solidly tied to the OG legend that inspired generations of ghost hunters to seek out the real-life haunted house for themselves, which in part is the reason behind the changes. Despite the game not being set there, its original marketing used images of the real Skur house, and the current owners of the private residence complained of an uptick in trespassing by presumed ghost hunters and blamed the game's announcement for it. In response, Wales Interactive removed all references to the real house in later ads, even though there was no legal precedent to do so. These slightly above average reviews, giving it a 69 on Metacritic, are largely correct that the game doesn't do anything groundbreaking or new in the genre, but they miss one large aspect that is true for all of Wales Interactive's titles, at the time of this video at least, that they are never sold at AAA prices. Made of Skur was listed at £19.99 new, and yet sites like Eurogamer like to point out that it's no better than the most recent Resident Evil, but for a game priced at only a third of that game, that's a massive compliment. Of course, that doesn't make the game perfect, but for the price, I was very surprised with what I was getting here. Even with Soul Axiom, Wales Interactive's game still had that veneer of an indie title that doesn't hold up against higher budgeted games. But Made of Skur does. This is solidly a AA game. The presentation could easily stand up against many titles in 2020, and the atmosphere is immense with great, if not stereotypical visuals and superb music. Better still, sound balancing is no longer a problem. In terms of being a survival horror game, this is a stronger approach to an isolated haunted house style game than the newest Alone in the Dark, with similar graphical fidelity, far better optimization and performance, and minimal stuttering. Both are heavily inspired by Resident Evil, which undoubtedly reigns supreme, and while AITD 2024's story is more eclectic and interesting, Made of Skur still maintains a strong narrative with its adherence to the classic legend, even if the plot and twists are entirely predictable. I can't make any excuses for the brain-dead AI though. The game utilizes a sound-based stealth system with blind enemies, and it's almost impossible for them to notice you unless you're actively trying to get yourself killed. So the problems of Master Reboot remain then, with presentation doing the heavy lifting for a game with average gameplay. But after many of the games we've seen in this video, from beauties like Spirit of Speed 1937 and Robin Hood's Quest, Wales finally has a game developer to be proud of that is helping to put us on the big stage. Even so, the best game from Wales, in my opinion, doesn't come from a large studio. It comes from just one man, continuing the efforts started by John Jones Steele all those decades ago, Warsim by Hugh Millward. We've come full circle back to text-based games, only this one was released in 2022. This kingdom management simulator may seem simple on the surface, but with decades of extra computing power behind it, this isn't a modest adventure like the first game in this video. Instead, much closer in complexity to other gameplay-focused, graphically modest games like Dwarf Fortress. Hugh solo developed the epic over 4 years, taking inspirations from the like of Mountain Blade and the Elder Scrolls, and with its heavy focus on procedural generation, it's like it was made for me. As you may know, I'm the first person who will happily dive into a visually simplistic game if it means intriguing and surprisingly deep content, and Warsim offers that in droves. You start the game being anointed as the new ruler, but how you rule from there is entirely up to you, as is the success of your kingdom. You're free to become a ravaging warlord commanding bands of mercenaries to scour enemy lands, or a ruthless dictator eking every penny from your serfdom. Or both. Both is always good. You could also be a well-loved and benevolent ruler that begins a golden age and era of peace, but where's the fun in that? All races and kingdoms you encounter are procedurally generated, as are all the events and occurrences that may happen, ensuring that no game will be entirely alike, and forcing actions that you may not want to make to ensure the continued success of your empire. If you can get past its graphics, there's a lot of fun to be had here, and quite a bit of heartbreak too. Accepting failure will sometimes have to be a given, or just re-rolling the game to try again, but this time that little bit wiser than before. Hugh even actively responds to criticism and recommendations on the game's subreddit to this day, a level of fan engagement we rarely see from larger developers. While Warsim is still actively developed, receiving an update only a few days ago as of the time of writing, it's Hugh's next project that excites me. Now operating under World Viper Studios, he is currently kickstarting a new cyberpunk-inspired life sim RPG called Slumbox. It's this clip from an interview on World Viper's YouTube page that sold me on it.
The biggest inspiration, weirdly, for Slumbox was an old Flash game called Stick RPG, where you have a tiny little squared off little world, and you're a stick man, and you walk around, you go get a job working McSticks, make your money. You can go to a casino, you can give a kid cigarettes, and you get a skateboard, and you can skate around, and you learn skills in university, get higher educated, and then you can buy a bigger house and all that. It's basic, but also amazing at the same time. And as a kid, like, it was one of the best games ever. This little Flash game, like, amazing.
If you have never played Stick RPG, then you really missed out on a cultural institution in South Wales in the mid to late 2000s. It felt like every boy my age had played it. Playing this little Flash game in the library during lunchtime was a foundational time for many at my school, combining the core elements of GTA and Postal with The Sims in a way ostensibly designed to fascinate bored 10-year-old boys. Anyway, I'll leave a link below for those who want to check out the Kickstarter, not a paid ad or anything by the way, just something I'm personally excited for. Thanks to the access to the tools required and the education and skills being freely available online, indie game development has blown up worldwide, and Wales is no different. Shout out to WalesInGames.com and its founder Aaron Elias for the continued endeavours to document everything Wales in gaming. This section would have been much harder to research and compile without their work. As you can see from this list, there are quite a few developers in Wales now, most of whom started in the last 10 years or so. We've already covered the most notable ones in this video, but here are some more that stood out. Copper Gaming, which is working on a Wales-based detective game that plans to let players investigate crime scenes, interrogate suspects, and draw their own conclusions. The twist is that it's how we solve a crime that may be just as important as solving it, as mishandling evidence or improper treatment of suspects could lead to our failure to bring justice. Based on the Steam description, this game will also be available in Welsh, which is always a plus. Clothcap Games, this cutesy animation gaming hybrid studio, got its start making a historically accurate branching narrative browser game for S4C, a retelling of the story of Branwen from the Mabinogion, the earliest collection of Welsh prose stories compiled in the 12th and 13th centuries. One of their in-production titles, Little Lantern Locomotive, looks absolutely gorgeous, but there isn't much information available at this time other than it aims to be a cozy, charming puzzle game that will see players help the local inhabitants as they navigate a branching narrative, which kind of describes a lot of games, so my interest really comes from how lush these screenshots are. And there's Pillbug Interactive, who have a variety of weird and wonderful games under its belt. It was their latest, Captain Contraption's Chocolate Factory, that stood out to me, taking the complexity of Factorio with the 2D puzzle solving of World of Goo, with a bunch of chaos thrown in for good measure. I've only played a few hours, but what I've seen so far was quite good, even if this style of game isn't usually my go-to. And what happened to Jones Steele anyway? The last time I mentioned him, he had gone back to Aberystwyth to found West Coast Software, and that's where he still is. Over the years, he has been porting his Amiga versions of classic 80s games to modern platforms, and even made a HD remake of D-Generation. This iconic isometric action puzzle game was originally developed for the Apple II in the late 1980s. When its publisher, Mindscape, released it in 1991, they handed off the Amiga and Atari ST ports to Abersoft. 24 years later, West Coast Software used that code as the basis for a HD remaster, released it on Windows and Mac, and later ported the original Amiga version and the HD remaster to all current home consoles. Although the Steam reviews say it all. I'm not well versed in the original, but based on these opinions and comparing the games side by side, I have to agree that the original has more charm. What's worse though is that the types of games that West Coast Software now promotes through AI-generated looking blog posts are online casino games, predatory slot machines with a different coat of paint between versions. This is just sad to see. Although this appears to be an initiative from the company's CEO rather than Jones Steele. Let's not forget either the even more depressing tales of all those development firms that didn't make it. As I researched companies across the decades, one thing became apparent. Game dev, as with many industries, is absolutely brutal, and many businesses are unsuccessful, 3 of which even won BAFTA Cymru awards of their own before being dissolved. Dojo Arcade won theirs in 2017 for the now delisted mobile game Creature Battle Lab. Rant Media Games earned their one a year earlier in 2016 for mobile game TV Sports Soccer, and then there's the ironically named Sitting Duck, who were awarded a special commendation at the 2013 BAFTA Cymru Awards for Go Candy, which was actually co-developed with Wales Interactive. Sitting Duck aren't officially dissolved on Companies House like the other two, but with no accounts filed since 2021, they basically are. The pattern here is the competitiveness of the mobile gaming market, but some other studios created console and PC indie games and still met the same fate, such as Mochi Mode, developers of Moo Moo Move, who entered liquidation in 2020. I'm sure there are many other game dev companies over the years since the 1970s that didn't leave a strong enough digital footprint for me to have found them. That's the limitations of videos like this. I have tried my hardest, but I apologize if you're a developer watching this who may have felt overlooked. To conclude then, it's been a tumultuous history, that's for sure, and for much of the 90s and the 2000s, things weren't looking great. Yet with the new array of developers in the indie scene and the big dogs like Wales Interactive, I feel we finally have a fledgling game development scene to be proud of. It's been a long time coming. Here's hoping for even better games to come in the future. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it and want to help me make more stuff like it, I have a Patreon and YouTube memberships, which offer early access to videos and exclusive behind the scenes content for just £1. A huge thank you to all of the current members. If you would like to talk to me, you can hit me up on the Jewelry Discord channel. Links to all of these are in the video description, along with links to the full written script and source list. Firefox asks, when fighting Moonlord in Terraria, should I focus on movement speed, armor, or dodge chance for my options? Damn, you got me there. I did say members could ask any question they liked. Well, joke's on you, I played a ton of Terraria back in the day. The problem though is that it was so back in the day I can't really remember. I only played with friends, which likely made it easier, but from memory we would build large world-spanning platforms in the sky and then just hope our regenerative items pulled through. Pretty much like in this video guide I found from Beaverack. Hope that helps. Firefox also asks, what is your favourite game from your homeland and why? And can you recommend any other hidden gems? That's an easy answer, it's Warsim for both, no question. The reasons why I already stated earlier in the video. I did really like Dead Reset as well, but as mentioned, I'm not entirely convinced those FMV titles qualify as video games, they're interactive movies really. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.